Hi, friends. Welcome back to Save Black Girl Reads, where I'm your host, Ariel, the best friend in your head that you never knew that you needed, but you're so glad you have. Welcome back to week two, where we are of becoming, where we are reading the book of the Forever First Lady, simply in honor of her new book that's coming out in November, on November 15th of 2022, The Light We Carry. So I don't know if you had planned to go get the book or not, but since we're gonna go get the book and we're also gonna read the thing, so I just need you to do your part, all the things, all the things. But so again, like I said, we are rereading. Well, I am rereading, but we are reading it for the first time on this channel. So if you didn't get the opportunity to read it when you were supposed to in 2018, here we go, girl. We are reviewing the things. So last week we talked about some of the things in terms of becoming, and it really focused a lot on First Lady Obama's childhood. And so this week is kind of similar in that space of it is, the before era of her being the first lady. This is still in her childhood. She's now in the adolescent phase and, learning about how to be an adult and inching into the adult space. So we're starting off with chapter 4, where there is this kind of subtle time jump that we see going from elementary school to middle school. Because when we left off, girl, she was in third grade doing the things, and now here she is. She's still at Bryn Mawr when we open the chapter, but that quickly phases into this space of this time jump of her being 14 and in middle school. But in the space and in the midst of that jump, she does this thing that is really, really nice in chapter 4, where she honors her mother. And I just thought, like, wow, that it's such a it was a brilliant and beautiful way of how to honor her mother. And so we learn a little bit more about her mother, Mrs. Robinson. And so we see how former First Lady Obama actually recognizes that she didn't know what her mom did as a traditional homemaker when she was a child. Like, all she knew is that she went home and snacks were ready, lunch was prepared. Her mom was there. That's what she knew, that her mom was a constant and a consistent. But outside of that, she didn't really know what her mom did. The consistency of her mom and the honoring of her mom was brilliant. To speak to the space of her mom being very crafty as it pertains to the budgetary needs of the house, the fact that First Lady Obama didn't mention how she felt like there was any lack or need for her to step up or her brother to step up or anything like that. Like, they lived life with the understanding that their needs were cared for and they were provided for. And that is all attributed to her mother knowing what the budget needs were and how to get creative around it, from the space of making their clothes when they were younger up until maybe like middle school time, when kids are a little bit more cool and the fashion trends are what the fashion trends are. But up to that point, her mom made their clothes. She also was very whimsical and creative around the things like Christmas time, and how they how her mom created um this fireplace that she had her dad paint, and how it just really kind of replicated that for them. So again, she has like this real vivid memory of the beauty of her mom going out of her way, being crafty to assist with the budgetary needs of the home. And then she talked about how she could tell the seasons were getting ready to change by her mother's spring cleaning. Like, the fact that her actually highlights on page 46, we're actually going to go there and take a look at the things where she says that it is because of her mother that still to this day she catches the scent of pine salt and automatically feels better about life. Like, like, those are the simple things that our parents do for us that we just don't even know or tie to the comforts of, if you had a good parent. Because I understand that most people, Everybody's testimony is not the same, but in this space of her having a great mother and her mother doing the things that she was supposed to do and even going above and beyond in some areas, like this is just phenomenal. So she goes into this spill of calling it she talks about her mother's parental mindset and how she recognized it to be a brilliant mindset that's almost nearly impossible to emulate. And it is the kind of, she calls it an unflappable Zen neutrality, which she then goes further to actually describe it as she's unshaken, even keeled, not quick to judge, not quick to meddle, attentive to the moods of the house and adjusting to those needs as necessary. So if she and Craig had a bad day, she would give the small amount of pity that's needed. Or if she and Craig did something great, she would give the necessary praise that was needed to show that they did a great job. But she would also not go too far so as not to make them believe that that is how they had to earn her praise, right? So it was like, she talks about how her mother is just like very even keeled. And even in the space of giving advice, how she is, what did she say on page 47? When she offered the advice, it tended to be the hard broiled and pragmatic variety, meaning that she really didn't cut any corners. She really didn't, she really didn't. It was very matter of fact, in your face. Here it is, kind of straight, no chaser. She's gonna throw the grenade type of situation, but you're also gonna appreciate it. So she was that type of mom, and I thought that that was actually really, really great. And then she talked about how she loved them. And on page 47, I am actually going to read the excerpt where she said, "She loved us consistently, Craig and me. We were not overmanaged by her, though. Her goal was to push us out into the world. I'm not raising babies," she'd tell us. "I'm raising adults." She and my dad offered guidelines rather than rules. It meant that as teenagers, we'd never have a curfew. Instead, they'd ask, "What's a reasonable time for you to be home?" And then trusted us to stick to our word. So let's just have a moment. Like what? Because my mom got married when I was like 16 to my stepfather, who I love dearly, and they're still married today. And essentially, he was the type of like, no, you're old enough to make critical thinking decisions about your curfew and to give yourself the speech on the way out the door, meaning I trust you to make good decisions. I should not hear that you did not make a good decision. So I think giving that type of responsibility from coming from both sides of that and actually experiencing both of that in my life, I can say that it is a lot more of a responsibility when you know your parents trust you to make the right decisions, that they literally put their trust in you to make the right decision, and that nothing that you do is going to take away their thought process or that trust to make the right decision, except for you saying that you're going to make the right decision and then you do something to violate that trust. So just putting that out there. But I thought that that was absolutely amazing that her parents raised them in that way. And so then we get to the point where, she's also the type that she doesn't absolve them of their decision making in hard decisions. Because then we see this whole thing in this whole scenario that former First Lady actually paints about her brother Craig and how this little hot to trot girl in the 8th grade was propositioning him. She was setting him up because, listen, Craig had a bright future. He was out here playing the basketball games and doing the stuff and was looking at the scholarships and whatnot, and he was going to the Catholic school. And she was like, she was like, "Ooh, a meal ticket." No, that's probably not what she was thinking, but also she liked him enough to set him up with a nice proposition and say, "Hey, we could hang out tonight. My parents won't be home. What do you think?" And so in the process of the storytelling that former first lady does, she says that, first her brother Craig actually, told half truths and didn't tell the whole story. He's omitting things, so he's lying about what's actually going on, to the point where, but it's eating him up inside. This decision that he has to make, it is eating him up inside, to the point where he goes and he tells his mother, thinking that his mother is going to go off the deep end and she is going to give him a piece of her mind. And guess what she did? She didn't do that, sis. Lean in. You know what she told him? This is why, again, First Lady Obama's mother is unmatched. Like, you can't, she's undefeated. Because we talked about how she told a teacher last week, you should resign and go put in your application at the drugstore. This week, she has told her son Craig, well, I trust you to make the right decision. What? Come here, friend. How many parents just, even your own, how many parents do you know they'll receive that information of, hey, a girl propositioned me to come spend the night at her house because her parents are not going to be home, and it was eating me up, and I actually lied to you about all of the things that was leading up to this one moment, but I feel bad and I feel guilty, so I'm going to tell you now. What should I do? And then they turn around and they say, well, I trust you'll make the right decision, and leave you in that agony, that mental agony and angst. What? Again, undefeated. Because I don't know many parents who would just sit there in the peace of their mind, knowing that they taught their child well, to trust them enough to make the right decision in this type of hoopla. Oh, girl. And she still, and the part that is just so undefeated is the fact that she continued to leave Craig in that agony of wrestling back and forth with the decision and what he knows to be right versus what he wants to do. Leaves him with it. Girl, again, undefeated, unmatched, just done. It's a wrap, go home. I do not have any children as of yet, but I hope that if I do have children, that I am that type of mother that I think these things through. So moving on, that's within this space of former First Lady actually growing up in the elementary school space and then evolving into who we now meet as this 14-year-old girl. And in that space, a lot has happened. She's gotten her period. She's wearing regular bras. She eats lunch at school now instead of coming home. She hangs out with the Gore sisters, Diane and Pam, instead of going to Southside and sitting and listening to jazz with him. She's now listening to music with her friends. And she's also talking about boys and hoping that the boys ride by the house and things of that nature. And she's daydreaming of slow dancing with them. And she's thinking that her parents don't understand this and that they've never been this age, so they can't understand. And so she finds solace in these levels of vulnerabilities with her friends, the Gore sisters, which I thought like, oh, that's beautiful that she was actually able to express her space of sisterhood, especially in this time of transition for her in middle school, because middle school can be a trying time. But anyway, I digress, we're going on. She then talks about, though, in this phase of this newfound freedom that she has at 14 with all of these different things, her body's changed, she's doing things and running errands for her mother now, and she's not as necessarily as so tied to her parents as she was when she was younger. They trust her a lot more to do the things that she's supposed to do, so they send her now on these errands and things of that nature. She rides the bus by herself. Like, she highlights these things, but she also acknowledges the vulnerabilities of being a young woman by herself and these freedoms of understanding that sometimes the cat calling, like that, she has to ignore that. If she is walking past a group of men, she doesn't make the eye contact. She doesn't want them thinking that she's accepting of this gawking that they're doing at her body, at her legs and hips and body. Like she's not trying to give them that type of attention because she doesn't want it. But it also comes along with the territory of the expression of, getting older, her body's filling out, things of that nature, but also understanding and using the wisdom too of not going anywhere by herself at night and things of that nature. Sometimes coming along, using Craig as an escort and a buffer, things of that nature. So she does explore like the joys of getting older, the newfound freedom that she has, but also the things that come along with it. Because as women, I think even in this space, if you are a woman, you understand this, the talks of, don't put your drink down when you go out in public places. If you're going somewhere, go in groups, text your friends, somebody needs to have your location, let them know, don't go anywhere by yourself at night, or if it is, check your surroundings. And it is very interesting that we have to have these conversations, but a lot of times our male counterparts don't necessarily have to have them. If they're Black, they're having different kind of discussions, but even still, like, just the fact that sometimes our discussions don't necessarily parallel, or they don't necessarily match in the same way. Because if you talk, most men that I talk to, they've never had to have that conversation of don't go anywhere by yourself, don't drink, don't put your drink down, or things of that nature. Maybe they do, but it's not to that extent of like the anxiety around having a girl. So I will just say that, and that'll be my 2 cents. And the last thing that I want to just kind of highlight of this chapter that I thought, 2 things that I want to highlight. First and foremost, again, attributing the honor to her mother of like the adjustment of things. Like they didn't realize that, the creativity around rearranging the rooms so that the kids could have separate rooms. Like, I mean, genius. Her mother is a genius, but even still, and then giving them the availability and the capability and trusting them with their own phones to have conversations, because Craig is tying up this phone talking to these girls, honey. And Michelle is tying up the phones talking to these girls about these boys. So it's a lot going on. They have older kids who have, social circles that are growing. But also in the midst of that, we find out that your former first lady was out here. She arranged her first kiss on the phone. She called Lil Ronell up from the Chicago choir, from the Chicago Children's Choir. She called Lil Ronell up from the Chicago Children's Choir and was like, you want to come over here, sit on the bench, and we want to try this kissing thing out. What you think? What? And again, you got to think about this too, because she talked about how Chiaka, the same girl from kindergarten who did the sight words better than she did and got the gold star the first day, Chiaka was the one who hooked them up. Chiaka hooked them up, and then the first lady got on the phone and was like, hey, let's try this out. Let's see. And so she said she was sitting out there on the bench with Lil Ronell. She was sitting out there on the bench with Lil Ronell, and she said she gave him the kiss. But here's the thing. She said it wasn't earth shattering. It wasn't anything to write home about, but it was fun. I thought that was very sweet of her to honor Ronell like that, because I was just like, oh, wow. Okay, last thing, and we're moving on. So she talks about how she took her parents' marriage for granted. On page 51, she talks about like how her mother at every spring, actually, when she got older, she was having these conversations with her mother, and how her mother spoke about at every spring, she thought to leave her husband. And in that space on page 51, she actually talked about how now, as she is a married woman, she's a wife and she is also a mother. She talks about how she understands now that even a happy marriage can be a vexation, that it's a contract best renewed and renewed again, even quietly and privately, even alone. So she actually honors her mother, even in this space of allowing her to have these moments of like, girl, I didn't know. I didn't know. I didn't know if I wanted to stay with your dad or not. Some days, every spring, I thought about where's the exit sign. But also, now that she's in the space of being a married woman, she also thinks about how her mother renewed her mindset over and over of being married. And I think this was a beautiful way to honor her, to look at her mother as not just her mom, but as a woman, to look at her mother as not just a mom, but as a friend who gave sound advice. And this was just absolutely beautiful. It was a beautiful way to honor her mother in chapter 4. That's really what I took away from it. Everything else that was in there was absolutely decent and it was wonderful, but those were the highlights and the takeaways that I had for chapter 4. Okay, so now we are going into chapter 5. And hun, let me tell you, it is a lot of transitioning that's happening in this chapter 5 space. A lot has happened. So now we have gone from middle school to high school. Former First Lady is attending Whitney M. Young High School, which is the first magnet school of Chicago or in Chicago. So she's attending that school. Her mom has gone back to work and is working at a bank as an executive assistant. Craig is now attending a Catholic school that her parents are paying tuition for, specifically for like his abilities in basketball, but also they pressed him on a good education because even in the space of basketball coming and going and being fleeting or possibly being fleeting, they wanted him to have a really good education to also go along with that. And someone very dear to me usually says that education is the great equalizer, and to an extent that is true. And so I love how her parents actually, really push Craig in that way to continue on in that, to continue in his education as well as seek, basketball in that way. So that was really smart on their behalf. Now he has a new maroon deuce and a quarter, and he is, once Craig goes off to Princeton, he's driving 12 hours to a game if he has that capability, because again, he loves his car and he loves to drive. So that's a lot of the transition in a quick cap. But going back to former First Lady here at Whitney M. High School, because there is a lot going on, hun. So she's now in this new space. This is the first time that they're doing a magnet high school, and they are busing kids from all over the place. So it's not just the people that's in her neighborhood. It's also, and I think that's a part of the thing that is a little intimidating for her, because she doesn't notice everybody from the schools at Bryn Mawr or at Bryn Mawr or anything like that. She's now in this space, and the only familiar faces that she knows is her neighbor, who's the assistant principal, Terry Johnson, who's a friend on the street, and Chiaka, the one who set her up to kiss Ronell. So they are the ones that are at this school, but this is wildly new to her, because up to this point, she had been attending schools where Craig would set the stage for her as, the Robinson boy, or, from the Robinson family. So then she could come in and skate kind of off of his style and his personality. Here at Whitney M. Young, she is having to set herself up in her own social circles on her own without her brother. So this is, something that is wildly new to her, because usually her brother is her predecessor. She's also in class with a lot of elite Blacks whose experiences are very much so unlike hers. They have passports, they're going skiing for vacation, they're members of Jack and Jill's, they're talking about summer internships and attending HBCUs. Again, shout out to all the HBCUs. We talked about that last week. Shout out to my alma mater, Savannah State University. Woo-woo. But again, having this space of these different types of Blacks who have different types of experiences. And she brings up on page 58, she says something about her first months at Whitney M. Young. And she says, But my first months at Whitney M. Young gave me a glimpse of something that had been previously invisible, the apparatus of privilege and connection, what seemed like a network of half-hidden ladders and guide ropes that lay suspended overhead, ready to connect some, but not all of us to the sky. So in this space of now realizing that all Black people are not living the same life, first and foremost, she actually connects the dots of the privilege that some of them have by way of the connections that they make. So again, what, the person one of the people that I hold dear says about, education being a great equalizer, it is because her education put her in a space where she now has these connections and connectivities with these elite individuals who are Black, who, again, go vacation and do the things, and they got passports and they put in stickers and stamps in the passports. And so now she has this connectivity to know some of the things that, were previously not known to her by way of what she called her flawed neighborhood, in chapter 1, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. But she also talks about how she gains confidence, and she's learning that, it's safe to be smart at this school, which is a parallel to how she kind of maneuvers through when she first gets there, her freshman year, because what's ringing loudly in her ears is, am I enough? And how many times do we start things where it's new to us and we have never experienced it before, and we wonder, like, our insecurities speak pretty loudly to say, am I enough? But how many of us are actually brave enough to still continue to bear down with it, try to figure it out, mess up some, and, run our heads into the walls if we need to, figuratively, not literally, but also, try to figure these things out. And I think she talks about, and she gives a very vivid type of space of, like, I'm gaining confidence and continuing to learn in these spaces, continuing to socialize in these spaces without the crutch, who is her brother. So then there's this space where former First Lady decides that she's going to make a decision for her parents without them knowing. And in comes this discussion about the France trip that they are planning in her magnet school. And, they're doing the trips and everything like that, but she doesn't bring it up because she knows that her parents are paying an obscene amount of money for Craig to be at Princeton, right? And she just doesn't want to add to that burden. And I think that is something very telling of her and the way that they have raised her to be an adult, that she actually does think about, like, oh, well, I don't want to do that. But also, this is where she also learns that, like, yes, you should critically think. Yes, you should think in the way of an adult, but you should also let the adults make the adult decisions about whether or not they're going to send you to Paris for the summertime. So her parents actually bring this to her forefront of, like, you don't get to make that decision for us. We will decide whether or not that is something that we can do. And she actually describes it as her father feeling almost insulted that she would actually take that approach to make the decision on her own. And so she actually talks about how her parents actually sent her to Paris, and the beauty that it was that she was able to get out of her neighborhood to explore the things, which I am a huge proponent of. Listen, public service announcement, lean in. Okay, lean in. Okay, so friends, those of you who have children, right? And I just want y'all to think about this, right? There will be a time where your child will need to explore the things. And maybe you don't necessarily have all of the means and the funds to do something regularly, but I would admonish you to take them out and give them experiences, or if an opportunity comes for them to experience something outside of what it seems as protective to you, to let them go. It is such a beautiful experience that they will appreciate and remember for the rest of their lives. And it will give them an opportunity for them to see what is outside of what they think is their normal. It will give them question, it will give them critical thinking. It will also give them a bigger experience to know that they could want for more, which is usually, as a parent, something that you would want to give them. So I would just admonish you. I'm not telling you to take them on vacations to Jamaica and into the Honduras every or to Belize every summer. But what I am saying is, if they get the opportunity, you don't hold them and squeeze them so tight that you don't let them go. Let them go. They would be a much better global citizen because of it. That's just my soapbox moment. All right, stay focused, girl. Here we go. Here we go. So she talks again. We were talking about the French trip, the fact that her parents let her go. And this is what she said that she learned from that particular incident. She learned that, and here's how it's put. She said, we were their investment. Me and Craig, everything went into us. She learned from that moment that they got joy from doing the things for their children. So they didn't want to hear about what they could and couldn't afford, because at the end of the day, their children are their investment. And a lot of parents actually do believe that, even if yours doesn't, or you feel as though yours doesn't, a lot of parents actually do. I would challenge you, if you are watching this and you don't necessarily know, I would challenge you to go ask your parent, do you see me as your investment? And wait for the answer. If they say no, continue moving on, keep it pushing, buttercup. God bless them on their way, because your future is still bright. But if they say yes, you know that there's a stronger love that surpasses just the things that you want to do, that they really do see greatness in you and they're willing to invest in it. Okay, that's again another moment. So we also come into this space of understanding that take this in, take this in, take this in, right? Former First Lady Michelle Obama was friends with a young lady by the name of Sunita Jackson, who we then learn is the daughter of the Reverend Jesse Jackson. Like the down with dope, up with hope man, like to turn your TV off for 2 hours, like him, like just the one who ran in like 1984 to be the black president, like when he was running, like that's her best friend, like that's her best friend daddy. Like what? So okay, because we gotta unpack this. We gotta unpack this. So the biggest thing that I took away from their friendship is the fact that the first lady, former first lady, was able to really see activism, and she was able to participate in it, but also, trying to balance that with just being a regular teenager. And she was able to see that from the front row of her best friend, Sunita. But she talks about how there's this thing where they got caught up in, because they were trying to do something else, but they got caught up in going to this parade called the Bud Bilkin Day Parade, which on page 63, former First Lady actually highlights as an extravaganza of marching bands and floats that run for almost 2 miles along the Martin Luther King Jr. Drive through the heart of the African American neighborhood that was once referred to as the Black Belt, but was later rechristened as Bronzeville. And that the parade had been going on since 1929, and that it was all about African American pride. So I thought that was just absolutely beautiful that she would take the time to actually highlight that and learn about that by way of simply her friendship with, Sunita Jackson, and, the activism that came through her family, and her father being Reverend Jesse Jackson. Finally, we get to this point that I really want to bring up, where she talks about how it is time to consider colleges, Sweet Pea. She has gone through her matriculation time in high school, and it is time for her to start considering where she is going now that she has decided that she is going to Princeton. She takes this to her guidance counselor. She tells her guidance counselor, this is where I want to go. Her guidance counselor hits her with a, I'm not sure that you're the Princeton type. Excuse me, miss, who asked you? Who asked you what, who asked you? But I think that it was very big of First Lady Obama to actually talk about on page 66, just all of the things in her qualification. She said, but 3 years of keeping up with the ambitious kids at Whitney Young had taught me that I was something more. I wasn't going to let one person's opinion dislodge everything I knew about myself. Instead, I switched my method without changing my goal. I would apply to Princeton and scattershot I would apply to Princeton and a scattershot selection of other schools, but without any more input from the college counselor. Instead, I sought help from someone who actually knew me. Mr. Smith, my assistant principal and neighbor, had seen my strengths as a student and furthermore trusted me with his own kids. He agreed to write my recommendation letter. Boom, sis, boom. Like, listen, if you didn't pick up nothing else of a sermonette from this book, she gave you a sermon on page 66. She was like, if the naysayers saying the nay, then you find somebody who's going to say the yay and you finagle yourself around the naysayers. Not that you combat them and things of that nature and you waste your energy trying to tell them about how you're worthy, but you know that you're worthy anyway. You know that you're worthy and you work towards your vision anyway. Come on, hallelujah. That's the word for the people on today. That was free. But if you feel the need to give the offering, go ahead and tithe at your local church for the word on today, because that was a full one. All right, moving on. So she said she left that office after her guidance counselor had said that I'm not sure that you're Princeton material. And she said in her spirit, deep down in her shanana, just like, she said in her shanana, she said, I'll show you. I'll show you. And guess what she did? She showed her. Honey, your first lady went and did all the things. She got the recommendation from the assistant principal down the street whose kids she's been babysitting this whole time. And she does everything that she needs to. She's been serving on certain boards. She's student class treasurer and all of these other things that shows great accomplishment. And not only did she do it, but she got the letter in the mail that says, congratulations, you've been admitted to Princeton. All of that good jazz. She gets into Princeton. She got admitted into Princeton, but here's the kicker. And this is where she threw me for a loop. And I was like, listen, let me tell you, the first lady of, the former first lady of the United States, Michelle Obama, she's on a different type of wave of glory and anointing on her life, because what, sis, she hit me. I don't know. She hit us with I never told that counselor. Go back and read it. She said it on page 67. She said, I never did stop in on the college counselor to tell her she'd been wrong, that I was Princeton material after all. It would have done nothing for either of us. And in the end, I hadn't needed to show her anything. I was only showing myself. Okay, so let us just take a moment and just like the level of maturity that she was on in the senior year of the high school to find out that she was admitted into Princeton and that this counselor told her that she wasn't that material, and she turned around and proved her wrong, but didn't go back and tell her. Do you not know the type of pettiness that would have come out of me? I would have had to make an appointment just to lay the letter down. You see that? What it say? Read it aloud for the people. Read it aloud, because I want to hear you read it. I would just like to hear you read it. This is my last time coming to this office, but I just wanted you to know I got it. And have a blessed day. Like, what the level of maturity that the former first lady has, I did not carry. And this, she went to Princeton at 17. not 18, not 19. It wasn't like her birthday was late or anything like that. She got into Princeton and she was on the Princeton campus at 17. So let us be clear. She was walking around with this type of level of maturity at age 16, 17. Again, kudos to her mother and father for the ways that they raised her. Because let me tell you, that was not my testimony at 16, 17. I was not out here being a mature person trying to think like an adult and critically think. I would have went in there with my letter in hand, and I would, honey, don't, had I gotten the space to get the microphone in the office that they used to have where they made the announcements, I probably would have grabbed the mic and said, attention, attention, attention all student body. I just wanted to let y'all know that the guidance counselor told me that I wasn't gonna get into Princeton, but my letter came today and it actually said that I did. Like, kudos to her, just on another level that I admit willingly that I was not on. Okay, I digress. All right, moving on, sis. All right, final chapter, home stretch. Here we go. So in chapter 16, she has graduated. She has done this summer at this book binding place that has further solidified that she is going to do well in college because she don't want to have to go back to this book binding plant. She don't want no parts of it. But it opens, again, she's 17. She's now going to college at Princeton. She's in the car with her dad and her boyfriend of that time, David. And they're getting ready to drop her off. And I loved how she opened this chapter because she addresses the puppy love that sometimes we feel and what to do with it when we don't necessarily know if it's what we want, but we don't have a certainty that it is. Like she really does address it. Like she talks about David being her boyfriend. She talks about how he was her brother's friend. She talks about how he's going off to college and then he comes back during the summertime and that they're working at the book binding place together and they're going out on these real dates to the Red Lobster. He got money, because he out here, he's able to pay for the day. He's not like these high school boys talking about we dating and the only time we actually dating is when we holding hands in the cafeteria. She said, this man is a man. He's taking me on a date. And so then, and she also talked about how they fooled around and they smoked the pot in the car too, child. I was like, first lady, you gonna spend to tell you something like that? But I was like, oh, not that this is relatable because I didn't smirk the reefer, did not do that. And I was not out here in nobody's car fooling around. That's just, no, that wasn't my testimony. God bless her though. Just wasn't my testimony. But again, for her to really just talk about the space in which she was in with this young man, like she was in love, she was smitten, the things that she was willing to do with David, for David, because they're in love. And so she talks about how they have been dating over a year. So again, this is more than a couple of summers that they spent together. But she also talks about how they had declared love, but the love that they declared was only in this context of the place that she's getting ready to leave. It's only in the space of the South Side and the Southwest side of Chicago at the bookbinding place. Going to the Red Lobster. It's only in that place. It's not when he's in college and she's in college over in these areas. It's not when they smoking the weed in the car. It's not, it's no longer that. She's now at Princeton. Her brother's here, but also he's going to school somewhere completely and totally different. So this looks different. And she talks about how they were very awkward about it. Like they probably, and she knows now, hindsight being 2020, right, guys? She knows now that this is something that she should have prepared for, that they should have had a conversation about. Is this goodbye temporarily and I'll see you when I come home for break? Or is this goodbye forever? But she did this thing in the book in like a real time moment where she talked about how the person that she wanted to love, what she knew that she wanted at that point, at 17 years old, with her 2 suitcases, getting ready to head into Princeton for early, to talk about how to, not necessarily assimilate, but really just kind of trying to prep her mind for the things that were about to take place prior to everybody else getting to campus. And what she realized is that the love that she wanted. And when she looked at David, she realized that he was a really great guy and the love that they had was good, but it wasn't the love that she wanted. And she absolved and resolved in that moment that she had let him go. Again, the maturity of our former First Lady at age 17, because listen, at age 17, I was trying to hold on to a relationship that I know I didn't need to hold on to the point that the Lord sent a preacher at a revival service to tell me to let it go. Like, listen, again, the maturity level that she has, the maturity level, just wow. But again, it speaks to, going back to chapter 4, the wisdom in which her mother has raised her and her brother. The fact that her mother knows, I'm raising adults, and y'all gonna make sensible decisions. So, and she talks about how the way that she handled it, she wished she would not have handled it. She wished she would have handled it in a more mature way, to say that this is it. I wish you well. But instead, she ghosted him. So so there's still the maturity, but there's still also the things that were like, she doesn't really know how to weave in and out of these situations quite yet. Because again, she talks about how this is her first real boyfriend, not the like high school where you together and then you're not together, like the real one. So she enters into this Princeton space, a single woman, but also so now she has these spaces to really think clearly. And I would just admonish some of you all, I'm not saying that you should break up with your boyfriend or anything like that, but I am saying, think about the love that you want, look at the individual of who you are dating, and compare the notes. If the notes don't look the same, you might want to do what First Lady did and just send them on their merry way. God bless. God bless. Just send them on their merry way. Don't waste their time or yours. Okay. But anyway, so now she's in this space at Princeton. She's excited to be here, but she's also realized, so she's gone through the orientation process for, minority kids and things of that nature, who they try to prep for life at Princeton and college, how to read a syllabus, and other things that are needed, the maps of the campus and how to get around X, Y, and Z, and blah, 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 blah. And so they go through this pre-orientation type of situation. And now that they've gone through this, and now the other kids are coming in, and she's realizing that Princeton is extremely white and extremely male. And this is the first time that she's been in this space, because let us be clear, growing up on the south side of Chicago is extremely Black. Her elementary school, her middle school, Bryn Mawr, was Black. Whitney M. Young was diverse, but still Black. It was different types of Blacks, elite Blacks and not elite Blacks, and also a lot of Hispanics and things of that nature, but it was still Black. So this is the first time in her life where she's in this space where she is the chocolate chip in the cookie. And it is a very interesting space for her to be in. So she realizes that first, men outnumber the women 2-1. That's number one. in Princeton in the 1980s. And Blacks make up less than 9% of the population on the campus. So there's a lot going on. But she also has the comfort and the advantage of Craig being there because again, Craig has always been her leeway into social things and being socially accepted because he's been the things. And so Craig is now in his junior year on campus. He's big man on campus. He's known, his name is known and things like that. So she's able to kind of maneuver into that space as, you know, baby sister Michelle, baby sister Mish, and things of that nature. So it gives her a little bit of a comfort level. And then she meets her friend, Suzanne Alele, who is, I want to say like Jamaican American and things of that nature. And she talks about how she learned a lot from Suzanne, how they met in her freshman year, and throughout their years of matriculation, they decided that they would actually, you know, room together. And she talked about how Suzanne was the Laverne to her Shirley, the Bert to her Ernie, and how they were two peas in a pod. And she talked about the contrast, the stark differences of how she was orderly, everything that had a place. She labeled her folders, this and a third, and how Suzanne was over here doing a lot. Suzanne was involved in a lot of things. And it, you know, she was very athletic. She was involved in some of the social circles that were a little bit more diverse. And how Suzanne's lifestyle, she lived it differently in terms of how she kept her house, how she kept her side of the room. It was a lot less messy. Her clothes were all over the floor and she just kind of dropped them where they lay. But she did this endearing thing where she talked about how Suzanne actually taught her about living with other people who live differently than you, and how in the space of her learning that you can live with people who live differently than you, she was able to understand how to live with her now husband, President Barack Obama, former President Barack Obama, because apparently he leaves his clothes on the floor like Suzanne did, and she volunteered that information. But anywho, so she talks about how she spent a lot of time, even on this predominantly white campus. She does talk about how she spent a lot of her time with the Blacks and the Latinxes of the campus, who she found through this campus resource called Third World Center, which is basically the center where it was supposed to kind of, you know, create community and space like that for the minority students on campus. It was terribly named. She recognized that it is terribly named, horribly named, and it has been renamed since to be named after, I think, like their first Black dean of Princeton. But before that, Princeton was out here wilding, talking about it's the Third World Center, like the disrespect. But anywho, I told myself that I wasn't gonna get on that whole soapbox, so I'm gonna leave that soapbox alone, girl. We gonna step right around it. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. Don't you try to sit there when we said that we weren't gonna sit there. You move on. You move on, because that's what we're doing. Okay, so but going into some of the things that she talked about, well, I already talked about it. But one of the things that she talked about, even in the space of a lot of times the minority kids continuing to stick together and socialize together instead of going and making new friends, here's what she actually spoke about on pages 70, 74, and 75. She says, I imagine that the administrators at Princeton didn't love the fact that students of color largely stuck together. I understand that when it comes to campus diversity, the ideal would be to achieve something resembling what's often shown on college brochures: smiling students working and socializing in neat, ethnically blended groups. But even today, with white students continually to outnumber students of color on college campuses, the burden of assimilation is put largely on the shoulders of the minority students. In my experience, it's a lot to ask. At Princeton, I needed my Black friends. We provided one another relief and support. So many of us arrived at college not even aware of what our disadvantages were. And she talked about how their disadvantages were um, the fact that a lot of their peers had SAT tutors, how a lot of their peers were taking college courses and were familiar with them and the setup of how they work prior to getting to college. How they went to boarding schools away from home so they don't deal with the intensity of homesickness because they've already lived it. And again, those talking about those disadvantages that they were in. And then she talks about how it takes energy to be the only Black person in a lecture hall or one of a few non-white people trying out for a play or joining an intramural team. It requires effort, an extra level of confidence to speak in those settings and own your presence in the room, which is why when my friends and I found one another at dinner each night, it was with some degree of relief. It's why we stayed a long time and laughed as much as we could. I thought that she gave great honesty in this space. I thought that she did a fantastic job of kind of explaining, not just to Black people, because we all, those of us who have experienced being the American minority on campuses and in corporate settings, we understand what she is saying, that it is difficult to be the only one in the room. It is difficult to be the representation or the token in the room. And a lot of times it is difficult for us because there is no one who understands us. It goes without saying, and it's understandable that when she says that she spent a lot of time with the Blacks and the Latinxes on campus, of why she did so. Because there's not a sense of recognition in the spaces where she's the only one, because everybody else is looking at her crazy. So if she's in a room or if she's in her dorm room with her two roommates and she got the bonnet on to protect her hair and they don't have to wear the bonnet, that's going to be a topic of conversation. Whereas if she was rooming with two Black girls, it wouldn't even be a topic of conversation of why she put the bonnet on her head. They would know. Which is why I think it was brilliant that she highlighted this. A lot of times in these spaces where we're talking about diversity and inclusion, it is on the Black people to inform others, or it's the plight of the Latinxes to inform others, or it's the plight of the Asians and the Pacific Islanders to inform the plight of their people, which is this is y'all's initiative. You created this initiative of wanting to see diversity. You want the college to look like this campus brochure. Say that I felt so seen when she talked about this, because being someone who's in a space of corporate America where only black women in these spaces, the only other Black women were assistants. Only other Black women were the ones doing the administrative work. I'm the only one represented here. And then when there was a space where there were multiple of us, it was intimidating. People got scared and did outlandishly unthinkable things because they were uncomfortable. So it begs to, that particular part really spoke to me in a way that I was just like, oh my gosh, thank you for saying it. If you are someone who has created if you are a company or anything like that has created an initiative around diversity and inclusion, and you want to include Blacks, you want to include Latinx, you want to include you want to include Asians and Pacific Islanders, the better part of doing so is not to create a potluck and think that you've done your due. and said, hey, I've learned about it. No, actually ask them about their history and what they think of your people and how they have been affected. Ask them about the history that they have grown up learning that you thought was something else, to bring it to light. That's it. That's all I'm saying. Okay, we are moving on. We are moving on. Um, but again, I think the last thing that I really want to highlight is just how she talked about missing home, and like how you don't miss home, and you don't look at and think about the majesty of home until you're away from it, which is also really good. And which is why, again, I'm a proponent of people and children specifically. I'm a proponent of children leaving their hometowns, going to explore, and then if they still feel the need to come back home, they have that option to do so, but to go out and see the world and see the things, because away from your family, away from your family's dogma, away from the lifestyle that everybody in your 2 block radius lives, there are other people who are out here in the world living completely different lives. And but for you getting out and leaving, you don't know that. You're not challenged with that information. And so again, leave. You can come back. That's all I'm gonna say. But anywho, so she talks about how she's missing home, and she goes through a lot of the things. And when she calls home in a particular space, she actually talks about her conversation between her and her dad. And, you know, there's this space of like a lot of transition that, you know, because she's doing time jumps here, guys, but there's a lot of space of transition. And one thing that she has noted, or a few things that were noted in this space of transition, is one, Danny and Grandma are now in Charleston, South Carolina, and Grandma is feeling lonely because family that she knew and things of that nature is in Chicago. Mom is now working overtime to take care of Aunt Robbie, who is now in her 70s. She's having health issues, and Uncle Terry done went on the glory. He is gone, children. He is in glory. So there's a lot going on with that. So mom is now working overtime to try to help in that space. And I think the thing that really just kind of rocks her socks off when Craig had a game and their dad wanted to come and see his game was the fact that her dad is no longer on 2 canes. He's now in a wheelchair that his mother pushes. And it shakes her because when she calls home and she talks to her dad, she asks him how he's doing, and he says, I feel good. And she talked about how she lets the lack of self-pity, the lack of depression, the lack of anything in his voice comfort her in the space that he feels good. But then when she sees him in person and he's no longer on the 2 canes that he's on, when she hugs him and tells him goodbye freshman year, she realizes, oh, no. You can feel good, but also things are happening. So yeah. And it's also notable, or something to note as well, is that they both do this thing where they protect each other on the phone. And I was like, oh, she's like her dad. Because again, she knows these things of her mom is already working hard to take care of Aunt Robbie. She already knows that the household is doing the things. And unbeknownst to her, and she also knows that her dad is still going through stuff. She just doesn't know at a rate of it because she knows that her daddy not gonna touch it because he don't want to talk about it. But she realizes that like he protects her in the space of not knowing what's going on with him by saying he felt good. She protects him from feeling the need to continue to provide over, above, and beyond in the investment of she and her brother by her saying, I don't need any money, or I don't need anything. When he asks her if she needs anything, she's like, nope, I got it. I'm okay. And again, if you are in college or if you have gone to college, you know that's a lie. Because in college, you are brokest for the most part. For the most part, if your parents don't have means and you're like first generation, or you are one that is really trying to trek through, you know that you don't have the necessary means and things like that. So when people call you and they talking about, do you need something, you probably go ahead and take it. But sis was like, you know what, I'll figure it out. Again, the maturity of the former first lady, just wow. So let's just go ahead and we're gonna do our last review of the chapters overall, and then we'll talk about next week. So let's just take this in. First and foremost, former First Lady Obama is the way that she is raised, the way that things are just like, the way that she processes things, the way that she is kind of launched into life. It just looks like, man, the Lord was really keeping you and looking out for you the entirety of these times, to put you in these spaces, to put you in these places, like, to know the people that to rub shoulders with the people that you rub shoulders with. And not only that, but you did something with this. You did a lot with what you were given. Is amazing. To be like, just to say that, my brother's going to Princeton, I'm going to go to Princeton. What? Because she could have easily had said, rubbed her shoulders with, some of the other people, gotten a recommendation letter and say, you know what, I go to an HBCU. Or she could allow her counselors' words to really permeate her and really shift her trajectory. But instead, she took that as a lesson and she was like, nope, I'll show you. But I will say that the big space of transitioning from her going to, elementary school to now we see her and she is in college and she's really learning the things, she's doing the things, she's somewhere in her sophomore year of college. She did a great job in the things. Again, like I absolutely love reading this space of her journey, the fact of how she honored her mother, this space of how she is even still honoring her father, in the space of like knowing that he would have never wanted to be seen as a charity case. He would have never wanted to be seen as helpless. And she is not showing him in that way. This is a man who is able and willing to still go to work to provide for his family, even in the space of his pain. He is still willing to do the things because that is who he was raised to be. He is also someone who cares about his community and his society. And he is also one who cares deeply about his family and his children, to the point that whatever it is that they need, however he got to get this money, within legal ramifications, he's going to do, and he does. And so I think that she does a fantastic job of highlighting him in that way. I think she does a fantastic job of honoring her mother in the way that her mother was one that went along with the times to make sure that the happiness and the essence of her home was fulfilled in a way that was just unparalleled and unmatched. And the fact that both of them decided that they would raise children in a way to allow them the strength to make their own decisions, even when it is painful and even when they may be nervous about the decisions that have to be made, they still gave them the power to make their own decisions. I thought that was very, very beautifully done. And I think, even some of the highlights, being friends with, like the friends that she's had that actually prep her for things in the future. The fact that she's friends with, Reverend Jesse Jackson's daughter. What is her name? I want to honor her because I don't want her to be caught up in this space of her father. The fact that she is friends with, what is this baby's name? What is her name? Santita. The fact that she's friends with Santita Jackson, and in the space of understanding that friendship, she realizes that she don't want anything to do with politics, which is quite ironic because she's writing this book after being involved in politics. So again, phenomenal. It's a phenomenal read, even up to this point. Even talking about, losing love, but also losing it in a way that you're still fond of that person, as opposed to losing the love and you don't held on too tight and now you can't stand them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a lot of just wise moments of her and the wisdom that she carried even at such a young age. I just phenomenal, and to know that more than likely she raised her daughters in the same way. I'm like, I just hope that I can raise them with a similar sense of admonishment. Okay, so here we go, guys. Let's talk about next week because we are, I want to say, 1/3 of the way through the book. I want to say that, but I feel like I'm wrong. So hold on. Everybody just press pause for the cause because I think there's 24 chapters. So we've gotten through, no, we're 1/4. We're a quarter of the way through the book. So congratulations to you that you've made it already through a quarter of the way of the book. Yay, go you. We still got 3/4 of the way to go, but you never mind that, sis. Never mind, because that's not your business right now. Your business right now is to make sure that you read chapters 7, 8, and 9 and be prepared for our next video that's coming out possibly in the next week. So that's your business. Your business is not to worry about how much more of the book that we got to read. No, that's my business. So you stay in your lane, I'm gonna stay in mine, and we gonna run on, see what the end gonna be. Amen. Okay. So chapters 7, 8, and 9 are what we are reading for the next post. And then we will talk about the things. We will come back. We will key again and do this all over again. So until the next time, saints and ain'ts, I'll be seeing you. Okay. Have a great day. Bye.